Well, hello, good evening. Welcome to Business Focus here on TV3. We're live on TV3 Ghana on Facebook, DSTV channel 279, all across the world on 3news.com. Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta has warned of dire consequences and as economic consequences for the country if the Electronic Transactions Levy, that's the E-Levy bill, fails to pass. Now, if you recall, there's been a town hall meeting to rally support for this, to convince the public to support the tax policy. He's been stressing that economic gains made by government in recent years will stall if Ghanaians do not support the initiative. You recall he was in Parliament on Friday, reduced it from 1.75 to 1.5%. The minority say that they are having none of that. And indeed, that has also been expressed by a section of the Ghanaian people as well. But the finance minister is also saying that the recent Fitch downgrade of Ghana is a foreshadow of what is to come if the bill is not passed. We will get into this evening here on Business Focus today. We'll sit with the former finance minister, Seth Terkper, who is not new to the introduction of taxes while during his period as finance minister. We'll focus on him on Business Focus this evening. His views on the E-Levy going forward and matters arising. Stay with us. Seth Terkper is our guest here on Business Focus this evening. We will be back shortly on to take just a quick review of some of the stories that made headlines over the last 7 days.
Government has announced the appointment of finance and investment expert Kwamina Benchi Enchil Duka as the first chief executive officer of the Development Bank Ghana (DBG). In a press statement from the finance ministry, this comes after government, through an open and competitive selection process coordinated by Pricewaterhouse, appointing a 7-member board of directors to oversee the affairs of the DBG. Prices of petroleum products are projected to go up by 25 pesos from February 1, despite the suspension of the Price Stabilization and Recovery Levy. That's according to the Institute of Energy Security, IES. This is as a result of the 8.52% increase in the price of Brent crude and a marginal depreciation of the cedi to the US dollar during the last 2 weeks.
These and more on 3news.com. Make some time and visit 3news.com. But we're going to go for this quick break. When we're back, the former finance minister, Seth Terkper, is my guest tonight on Business Focus as we focus on the E-Levy matters arising. Stay with us. We'll be back. Welcome back to Business Focus on TV3. We're live on TV3 Ghana on Facebook, DSTV channel 279, all across the world on 3news.com, and we're very interactive as well, so let's hear from you. My guest this evening is the founder of PFM Tax, and this is what he's currently doing and also contributing to the discourse and proposing worthy alternative for government in terms of economic policy, not just Ghana, but across the continent. But most importantly for the conversation this evening is a former finance minister of the Republic of Ghana, Mr. Seth Terkper. I thank you for your time. Good evening to you. It's good to have you.
Thank you very much. And good evening to your viewers and I believe listeners as well.
Absolutely. And this is the first time we're sitting in this new year. So Happy New Year's in advance.
Yeah, many happy returns. It's already January.
You've been working. You had an engagement with PFM Tax on specific issues of economic concern, and the recent one was on the E-Levy and tax policy. But beyond that, what has been the focus outside Finance Ministry?
Well, as you rightly pointed out, the PFM Tax, the full name is PFM Tax Africa Network. So it's developmental, but it's going to be focusing on, the homeland, Ghana, but also we will be, if you go to our website, we've started, putting out stories about other countries and what is going on globally. Those who follow my Twitter handle and limited Facebook would see the trend where we are going. But the main focus, as the name implies, is public financial management. That's what PFM is, means. And even though PFM includes taxation, normally PFM is associated with expenditure, so we add the tax. And you can see that when you talk about tax or revenue and then you talk about expenditure, you are basically talking about the beginning part of the budget or fiscal management. And so that is where we want to focus. We want to be very focused. But it doesn't mean that we don't cover, other things like the monetary policy trends because they are interrelated. Yeah. So that's what we do. That's what I've been doing generally.
I see. And it's important you make this point about expenditure and all, because just about 17 hours ago, you tweeted that our debt GDP ratio is to hit 83% or more.
With a question mark.
At end of 2021, despite recent official protests, question mark. Bank of Ghana's financial and economic data report puts the level at 78.4%.
Yes.
As at the end of November 2021.
Yes.
But excluding the bailout that is in the note.
Yes.
The lowest monthly debt amount is 3.4%, which added for December 2021, it takes it to 81.8%. This is despite the official protests. This is the tweet that just came from you.
Well, yes. So what we normally also do is to use official statistics, and then so if we take it, let's say in the three segments, Bank of Ghana says that our debt, and it's in today's MPC, they repeated it, is on their website, is 80.
That's 81.
78. Thank you. Yeah, 78.4%.
I'm looking at the website of the Bank of Ghana now.
Yes.
Yes, 78.4%.
78.4%. But if you look at, the footnotes or the notes to that, it says it excludes bailout costs. So what we did was to go to the budget and see what is the bailout cost, going to the end of the year. And so we take the two statements, the budget and this one, because this is not very explicit on the budget.
True.
So you go to other sources, and the bailout there is estimated between 5 to 8 billion, which gives you around 1%, 1 point something percent of GDP. So if you add it, to 78 point, then you add that.
We're exceeding the 80%
yes.
debt to GDP.
Yes, and the Bank of Ghana is saying it's exclusive. But remember, we are talking about the figure that is end November. So we go back and look at, because Bank of Ghana gives them monthly. So we see that from the beginning of the year, they were borrowing at the debt was increased at 4%. Then it tapered to between 3.5 and 3.4. So we take the minimum, we want to be conservative. So we take the 3.4 and say that if this is what we've been doing through the month, then let's assume that December will be 3.4. And so if you add it to the 80 which you just got, that puts you at about 83.
It's interesting to make this point because the Fitch ratings has a direct link. In fact, they made reference to the growing debt situation, that unsustainable debt levels. I'm just going to show you the reasons why Fitch downgraded Ghana's long-term foreign currency issuer default rating. That's the IDR from B to B minus with a negative outlook. Take a look at this. This is what Fitch said. These are the reasons. It comes in the context of uncertainty about the government's ability to stabilize debt and against a backdrop of tightening global financing conditions. Ghana's ability to deliver on planned fiscal consolidation efforts could be hindered by the heavier reliance on domestic debt issuance with higher interest costs. This is the reason Fitch gave.
So maybe we can take it one after the other. The first one, they are saying that our debt seems to be rising. Okay.
And the evidence is what we have just gone through.
Yes, the evidence is just what we have been talking, and you know that it has been increasing. And if you, I left out things like, in arriving at the deficit, for example, which I use, the provision for deficit in the budget is 1.9%. Sorry, 1.9 billion. Do we really believe that, the arrears in the system today is only 1.9 billion?
You doubt
and it
that?
was decreasing. Well, just look at, some, sometimes officials make some statements here and there. There was some admission that what is owed to contractors alone is between 3 to 5 billion. I believe that you came across that statement. Yes. We've been talking about releases to free SHS and others which has not yet, materialized. And so when you pick some of these anecdotes, the arrears could be underestimated. And moreover, when against the tightness, it's supposed to be falling from 3.2 or so percent to 1.9. So you make a little adjustment there, and these are the distance. Now, but more importantly, we know it in Ghana today when Fitch says that debts may be going up. We know it that all our revenue, right, mind you, when we talk about total revenue covering two items, compensation and interest, it doesn't include principal. But note that we are taking gross revenue before statutory funds have been taken out. Before, most people don't look at that. So if those are obligations, so definitely the company is going to borrow. Then they come to the second factor, and they say global factors, right? What are the global factors? I mean, the MPC statement, they hint at, central banks, the big ones, including the Federal Reserve, going to be increasing interest rates, right? Bank of England has already started. European Union is a bit coy about it, but we know that the trajectory against inflation going up in the US at 7%, 30-year high, right? So if you go back to the market today, you are not going to get the yields or the interest rates which you were borrowing, because you are borrowing from those markets. Sure. So there will be pressure, and your interest rate is already to the hilt, right? So you're going to be adding to it. Then they talk about, the domestic pressure. So remember, we couldn't go to the market in December for the remaining 2 billion, which was to refinance, basically. We've done some refinancing.
The existing debt.
The existing debt, right? So you don't want to default, right? So if you don't want to default, what do? You come to your domestic market. And then the government then begins to compete, with private sector, right?
And that will push the private sector
exactly, and that leads to increase in interest rate. And if you look at the MPC statement, which I haven't reviewed, thoroughly, but I always look at the fiscal elements. You could see Treasury bill rates is stabilized still somewhat, with even a drop according to the MPC. But the interest rates, and we had a graph when we did our presentation to show that the medium-term rates, when non-residents used to participate and the rest has been going up. That's our 3-year, 5-year, and other domestic bonds. Those interest rates are going up. So that's what the point they are talking about, our domestic. And then they point to the external vulnerabilities. Yes, how is all this going to impact, reserves? Because we're talking about lack of, money to support. So are we going to depend on our reserves to be meeting interest rates, and which reserves, right? If you have 5 years or 6 years of reserves, remember the composition of our reserves, for example, includes even our petroleum funds, which we show in the budget, and therefore is part of the core reserves of the central bank. So are we heading there? Is there enough of cocoa money left? We couldn't do bonds, which normally provide. So these are some of the trajectory which they use, to tell you, look, where you are going.
And some of the bonds issued 3, 4, 5 years ago are maturing this year.
Sure, that's so they see the trajectory. They are maturing this year, and then you have your zero coupon maturing in 2025.
I mean, how dire is this? I want to show you that this is what Bloomberg put out, and I know this is something that you have seen. I captured it on the Bloomberg website, the analysis that you see that gray area.
That's right, yes.
That depicts the situation as of January 2022 as we have it.
Yes.
And the finance minister is saying that the Fitch downgrade and what we are seeing on the screen now is a foreshadow of what is to come if, for instance, the E-Levy is not passed. What is the specific impact we will have on the situation as we've seen now?
Look, what is the context? the deficit, according to the budget, is 37 billion.
Yes.
Right?
For the 2022 budget.
Yes. But if you go to the appendix, let me just issue one clarification. If you go to the appendix, you will see that the deficit, we're just talking about cash arrears and whatever, ended at 37%, 37 billion, right? Then, when you go to the footnote, remember it excludes bailout costs. But when you go to the footnotes where they normally put the bailout costs, that deficit that should have been brought down, at 37%, was brought down at 32. Right?
32.
32.
Why?
So you add the 5 and you get the same 37.
37.
If the natural thing is to bring down 37, right, and then add the 5, as we would normally have done, then our deficit is around 43, 45. Okay, that's the first thing. But the point I'm making is that, and this is financing that is required after compensation and interest has taken revenue, again, before statutory funds and others. Everything else is dependent on loan. Okay? So the question is, what is the 7 billion in relation, to this 45? So and how can that become the, the main thing that would save, the budget? When you do not have access to the markets to borrow, there is closing. We do have access, of course. You will always have access, but if you are willing to pay the rate, interest, and the rest. So with this, that's why I have said that the 7 billion from the E-Levy, in terms of resolving our problems, is overrated. I see it more in terms of urgent liquidity that will be needed because it's going to be cash. It's not like profit tax, which will have to wait for the quarter or wait for, but this could be coming in, periodically. So I see more in terms of liquidity than in resolving the total problems that we have.
So you say, you put it that the E-Levy, in terms of its potential to solve the situation we have now, the economy is overrated. I mean, 7 billion or 6.9 thereabout. What difference would it make? Let
me give you another reason. The deficit of 37, if you like, or 43, as some of us are arguing, includes the portion of the IMF SDR. We are using it to finance the deficit because it wasn't shown when the money was coming in as a revenue.
It wasn't shown?
No, yes, you don't say. I stand for correct. If you go to the appendix, look at the details and see whether the IMF, is there. And therefore, it wasn't shown in the expenditure as to how we are going to use that money. Then you go to the appendix and you see it as financing. So first point, it is financing expenditure. So we've gotten this money, which is appreciation of our position, our investment in the fund. That one is for us. It's not like the COVID loan, and what are we doing with it? 1 billion. We don't have a structure to show. Maybe in showing financing, it may be what is financing capital. I give that. But the point I'm making is that has been consumed. 2, the 7 billion you are talking about is part of the 100 already.
It's part of the 100.5 they talk about.
Yes, part of the 100.5.
Okay, so
so it has already been included
in this 100.5
in arriving at the deficit that you're talking about.
The 37 billion deficit.
Yes.
The 6.9 billion is.
Yes, so it's not like a new resource that is coming, to help us out of financing 37.
Okay, so just for the benefit of our viewers, this 100.5 billion, and let me show this on the screen right now, the revenue forecast or projection for 2022 as captured in the 2022 budget.
Yes.
Take a look at this. According to the 2022 budget revenue expenditure target, the revenue 100.5 you see there.
Yes.
You're saying that the 6.9 billion expected from the E-Levy is captured in this 100.5.
It's captured in the 100.5.
And the expenditure, we're spending more, that's 137.5 billion. So there's a deficit of 37 billion. And you're saying you are challenging the 37 billion deficit, that it will be more than that.
Yeah, it will be more than that. Based on some for correction. Unless, of course, we are saying that given our current situation, we are going to be paying some of the past extra bond loans and the rest. That's the only way you will get it. Will come. It should be a subtraction.
I want you to drill down this point about the 6.9 billion expected from the E-Levy already captured in the revenue expected.
Now let me go to let me drill down. So if you go to Appendix 3A,
okay,
right, the details are given. So you have, the 100.5 made up of domestic revenue, 99.5, and then inclusive of the domestic is tax of 80.2.
Yes.
And then under tax revenue, you have the 80 is broken into taxes on income and then taxes on domestic. And then you go down further, you go to, and then, okay, so when you come to taxes on domestic goods and services, right, which is giving you 36.
Yes.
0.0, billion. The components are this: excise 6.1 or 6.2, VAT 14.5, national health insurance 3.3. That's the levy. Get fund levy 3.3. Communication service tax 651 million. The next item is E-Transactions Levy 6.9.
So it is captured in the footnote. I see it. So that's just for
it's captured in the appendix.
Yes.
And
a number of things that you will not see in the budget statement. For the benefit of our viewers, make some time, you go to the appendix. It has further detail.
Yes, and that's what we focus on as PFM Tax Africa.
You will not see in some of the values stated in the budget. So if you are dealing with the values stated in whole, as you just saw on the screen, 100.5 billion, a breakdown of that you would see in the appendix. And I'm actually just saying it there.
Okay, we've gone to it, yes.
Yes, the E-Levy is captured as part of the 100.5 billion revenue expected.
Yeah, before the COVID health levy. So what does it mean if it doesn't go through?
What does it mean?
Of course, it increases the deficit because revenue will be lower. So revenue will go down from 100, to 93. And the 6 will increase the 37 or 43. And so if it increases the 43, then our deficit is 50. And at 50, are you following what I'm saying?
Yes.
At 50, remember, it's close to what GRA has just brought in when we say they've met their targets, 57.
Precisely. And in fact, they said they exceeded.
So the entire GRA, yes. So what we need is the revenue for the entire GRA, to meet the deficit.
So.
And that's all going to be borrowing. So we are going to borrow to the extent that GRA has raised revenue. So now let me just say something in fairness. Ghana's budget has always been tight. I don't want to sit here and pretend that it's always been tight, But then you could see that some progress at various times, are made over time. So, for example, the deficit was brought down when we set oil revenue aside to pay for the first sovereign bond and to pay for some of the debt and others. You saw it. If you see that graph, I think last time I was here, we showed it. You see that the rate of borrowing was going down. And I quoted from the debt management report. What we are seeing as a Fitch, you see both interest rate, debt, and what are going up. Yes. And so this is a picture, Fitch is saying. So if you don't pass it, so you can see the need, the urgency around it, despite what we believe are various distortions and, it's not the
ideal. If this E-Levy doesn't go through, it will increase the already unsustainable debt levels.
Yes.
By that figure.
Yes. So if you adjust it to 43, as I'm saying, and the E-Levy is 7, you add, it will increase the deficit by 7, and that takes your deficit to 50 billion.
And the GRA was able to collect just about 57.32 billion.
Yes.
In
and
2021.
Yes, and it took a lot because if you look at the first 3 quarters, and again there's some normalcy about the last quarter because of Christmas and others bringing in revenue, but it jumped from an average collection. It means that what GRA did was to jump from an average collection of about 11 or 12 per quarter to 18, that is 16 or 17 year. And that's how come they were able to. So all that money in 3 months. Now, when you collect all that money in 3 months, it somewhat has an impact on quarter one, which is normally lean.
And now the target for 2022 has been increased to 80.3 billion. 80.3 billion.
Well, that's another issue. You know, so we so if you take the engine is GRA, so I always like to take yes. So you are quoting the GRA 80, so 57, and you have to collect 80.
80.3.
Yes, that's 30. Significant jump in a year. Close to 30.
About
20, 23 or
26 billion.
Yes, that's right.
26 billion increase.
Yeah. And so you have to go, what we then do is to go back and look at the rate of increases, which I didn't bring that data.
But you saying that is this a realistic target or one that the GRA will struggle to meet?
Well, so to put it more optimistically, they will struggle to meet.
They will struggle to meet.
Yeah, from what you said, whether it's impossible or I prefer to just say.
I didn't want to say it is impossible. That's why would it be challenging for them to meet this 80.3 billion?
Yes, GRA has a wherewithal, you know, but you know there were reforms that were taking place. You know, we created GRA itself used to be the Revenue Agencies Governing Board.
Yes.
You know, we merged VAT, you know, and IRS. We revamped the laws,
yes,
you know, and did quite a number of things. But what was left to be done is to focus on the domestic tax offices.
And in fact, which
is the equivalent of ICOMS. That's the stage where we were.
I see.
For the domestic, you know, tax, and
so
that has delayed.
You make reference to that, and that's a number of things. The tax laws project in 2010, I recall, this tax laws project that you embarked on in 2010,
yes.
and to reform some of the laws, and then also introduce the new taxes during that particular period that we saw. I just want to show our viewers what I'm talking about with this tax laws project.
Yes.
Some of the major tax laws that you enacted within that period: the Value Added Tax Act 2013, as amended, Value Added Tax Regulations 2016, Income Tax Act 2015. The Income Tax Regulations 2016, the Customs Act 2015, and a number of things that you looked at.
Another significant one is excise. You know, people often leave excise. Why? Because excise used to be buried in the old sales tax, which is now VAT, and in the customs tariff section. But excise is both on domestic and on import, unlike tariffs. So what we did was to carve out a new excise law. So that, yes. So for the first time, we had a new excise law. But let me give you the rationale for this. Let me take just two in the interest of time.
Yes.
You see, what you have is the Value Added Tax, 2013. The old act was Value Added Tax 1998, when the VAT was reintroduced. Then you come to the Income Tax Act. The old act, you know, was 2003. After SMCD 5, which was 1975. And they were being amended and amended and amended. And then the customs, I'm taking the three big ones. The Customs Act, in actual fact, was a PNDC law, you know, 330.
A PNDC law? And
yes, and then it was, it was, the name was changed to SEPS Management into Bracket Management Act. So and these were eras before you had E-Levy and all those, before the services sector became the largest sector of the economy. So if you take VAT, for example, the controversy, this is the rationale. You see, when you say expand the tax base, it's not just expanding it by the roadside. It is expanding it to cover new economy. Agric has long ceased to become, you know, the largest share of GDP, which is why we rebase, which is why Bank of Ghana changed the basket. Right, yet the biggest sector today, services, was outside the VAT. So we did a financial sector. We are coming to E-Levy.
Yes.
So what we did was to say, let us bring the financial sector now into the tax base. So we had various reviews. For example, with customs, we did some reviews of exemptions, and which led to the draft Exemptions Act, which is yet to be passed. So when we did this, we said, the services sector that is growing. The writing of the of VAT is not like the sales tax. And the sales tax, you list the services that has to be taxed.
Right.
So that's the Act 500, services provided by financial analysts, financial advisors. You see, we are talking about finance. So we said, given this, let's bring in the financial sector, but non-core. The reason being that and that takes us to some of the arguments I'm making. We didn't bring in interest because interest is core. The interest is not expenditure. VAT is a tax on expenditure. Interest is you have gone to the bank, right, and you have put your money in. So we didn't want to put the VAT on it. The VAT was on non-core, which is the fees the bank charges you, which is in our sales tax act. I'm talking about, this is a sales tax act of 1995, after the VAT was cancelled, right? So these fees were there, but it had expanded. There were no ATM, there were none, and the banks were charging all of this, right? So we brought all this in, and they were removed in 2017 with fanfare. And now we are bringing in a levy, which is taxing the savings that was excluded, by the VAT.
That's what the E-Levy is going to do?
Yeah, that's what it's going to do.
So, you see, one of the aims of this tax laws project in 2010 was to broaden the tax base, make them more user-friendly, enhance efficiency, facilitate compliance, and others.
But to bring them into the new era, when all these laws, which I mentioned earlier on, there was nothing like petroleum.
So then that leads to the next question about expanding the tax net. One of the reasons why the finance minister says this E-Levy is coming is because just about 10% of the population pay taxes. And we've been talking about expanding the tax net for only God knows how long. And so we continuously introduce these indirect taxes as a way of roping in the people who are not paying taxes, and thereby increasing the burden of those who are already paying the taxes. I mean, is there any justification for this path that we are on? That, look, about 90% of tax revenue is from the Greater Accra region. So many people are not paying taxes. So instead of going through the process of the hard way of identifying the taxable population that's not paying taxes, rather take the route of introducing indirect taxes that affects everyone, like the E-Levy.
Well, E-Levy affects everyone, right? But is it a fair tax?
Is it a question? Fair tax?
Yes, it's a question. And it's not. And it is taxing savings, and you don't tax savings. Let me give you a reason why. If you are paid, Mr. Counsel, the accountant here, we deduct PAYE. You don't even have an option.
Yes.
The law says you should divide the PAYE. So 100, PAYE 10. How much do you have left? Take home, as we say. Forget about other deductions. 90. That's the 90 you've left in the bank. It's been taxed already. Right? TV3. If the shareholders, through your hard work, adverts, you make profits. They pay corporate income tax. What you are paying is personal income tax, another income tax. Right? So they pay corporate income tax. Right? To GRA. What is left? They put in. Last time I was here, we didn't have this beautiful. Yes. So they want to invest in these things. Their money which is left, which they didn't take out as dividend. Right? So imagine they put it there, top it with some loan. Right? Gets, a contractor. This is not roadside, because remember the banks are big into it.
Yes.
So they are using Momo instead of where they had to set up their own mechanism. The reason you have electronic and everybody is using, including banks, is because they don't have to set up, their network independently as they used to.
Sure.
And there's a big company called MTN, which is all over Ghana. So if they want to pay the contractor, they just use that means instead of their own, which was not being taxed. So they take the savings after you have paid the corporate income tax, or after you have taken the PIT, they send it right? Is this new income?
Oh.
Yeah. So you are taxing loan. You go for a loan, it's being sent to somebody to do a work, and you are taxing the loan, right? You've earned your income, you've paid your taxes dutifully, as you know, and then you transfer it, and it's being taxed. You see, when the owners of TV3 use the money they transfer, right, to come and do these nice things, and you become effective, and your adverts increase, your sponsorships increase, next year you pay more corporate income tax. There's nothing wrong with it. You have invested the savings, so you pay more corporate income tax. But what we are taxing now is the wherewithal for the investment, which we have never done.
Which has the probability of stifling the investment to lead to increased production.
Precisely. And remember, we are using big business. Somebody selling roadside on the table decides to go and do, a sieve, hygiene, COVID. We all don't want, So he's educated, so I want to look nice on the table so that customers will have confidence that I'm selling a hygienic condition. So let's say you take, assuming many of us have wives who are trading, so you give part of your salary and the profit that they earn.
Yeah.
So the capital finishes, and they are doing mumu.
Sure.
So you transfer the money. What are you taxing? The capital savings which I have put to do the sieve is what you are taxing.
I want to take a listen to the finance minister talking about the justification for this E-Levy. Take a look.
With that background, let me share with you why we need the E-Levy, which is one of the key tax measures of our 2022 budget. We are at a stage in our national development where we must all play our part and put our shoulders to the wheel. Where Greater Accra is responsible for 90% of revenues, it's not the way to burden share. Where property taxes are laughable, it's not the way to go. Where the wealthy talk about regressive taxes to detract from their own non-payment, it's not the way to go. We simply cannot build forward better with a system where everyone takes and most do not give back. The two major sources of income to pay for expenditure for any government are taxes and borrowing. The balance will tilt one way or the other, depending on the capacity to mobilize revenues.
So that's the finance minister. As earlier indicated, the revenue we expect to generate internally, the 100.5 billion, the former finance minister has established that we are going to use that to pay compensation, that's salaries and the interest on existing loans. And remember that some of the loans and bonds we procured years back are maturing this year. So it's going to compound the existing problem as we have it. That's the finance minister. This is the justification for the E-Levy. Your reaction to this? The issues that he's outlined. One, the number of people paying taxes, he says limited to Greater Accra region, about 90% of them. And two, property rate or property taxes not being effectively collected. And then the rich talking about this because they don't want to pay taxes.
I mean, that is a perpetual responsibility of, GRA, right? Mm-hmm. I think the flip question is, what proportion of the GDP comes from within Accra Tema Enclave? Right. If output is in proportion to the productivity of an area, I'm asking you, compare Accra Tema to 40 miles, my hometown somewhere. What is the volume of economic activity? So some of it is just a natural course of the development. Right. Am I saying the people who are on the outskirts are down and other places should not pay taxes? No. But I'm saying that the concentration of business in every national capital is well-known region. So you go, that's why Hollywood, is big. That's why New York is big. That's why London is the financial center of the world, by virtue of, the axis where it's located, colonialism, seafaring, and all those, Yes, so I do appreciate that. But I think I think a more important point which he makes, which I agree, are the people in Accra who are making big money and are not paying taxes. And that is why I hear it's been dismantled. That's why we said, okay, they are complex, they are sophisticated. They do tax evasion. Well, not all of them, some of them, right? Some are paid legitimate taxpayers. Let's have a large taxpayer office. So it's part of the reforms to deal with those people. Because GRA cannot, and then let's have a medium taxpayer office, right? And these offices are about 22. GRA had at the time nearly 60, right? So if you tell, those offices were located in, the light taxpayer office was in Accra with an outlet in Kumasi. It wasn't even in Tamale. It's the medium taxpayer offices that were big in those places. Many regional capitals didn't even have large taxpayer offices. Why? Because the predominant large payers were in Accra, Tema. And then now we would have probably gone to, but even if you could go and get oil from secondary, Takrady and whatever, yeah, right? The headquarters for Talo is here. And this is where they will account. So it will go to Greater Accra.
So we need a disaggregation of that data.
We need to, yes.
To justify the claim about...
Yes, more importantly, you see the fact that, I think there are two elements which I want to distinguish. The fact that that's the 80-20 rule, as in many events. The fact that more revenue is coming from, for Accra is given. The fact that there are people in Accra who are not paying, requires tax structures, right? And if they're in Accra and you want to focus on Accra, and assuming that it is meant to focus on Accra, why is the E-Levy not only in Accra? And why is it not on large and the large taxpayers who are in Accra? This is a levy that is spread all across. And everybody, whether in a village or is paying 1.75.
We'll be back shortly after this quick break, and we'll round up this conversation with the former Finance Minister, Seth Terkper. If this is an unfair tax, what would he have done if he found himself in this situation? And his view on going to the IMF. We'll be back shortly. Stay with us. Welcome back to Business Focus. My guest is Seth Terkper. He is a former finance minister and the founder of PFM Tax. And he's been talking about the E-Levy and matters arising. So 2 questions finally, and we're done. If you found yourself in this situation, with all the conditions prevalent, what would have been your best option other than the E-Levy? And the option of going to the IMF, which government says it is not on the table for them.
The second one first. If you're not going to the IMF, give us a plan. It's not the desire not to go to the IMF. Then he felt it. That's why we started with a homegrown policy, expecting that oil will come in and we set up those structures to keep fund stabilization. But we're hit by Doomsaw and other things. So the pragmatic thing to do is that's where you get the money. So if we are not going to the fund and we are not going to, where are we going to get the money? That is the question now. It's as simple as that. That's, as I say, it's a choice, for the government.
Provide a plan if you are not going to the IMF.
If you are not going to the IMF, we don't see a plan. That's what Fitch is saying. I'm not the only one. Provide a plan, right? So, and then the first one was the alternative. Look, it's not for lack of reason that we say that we have done 18 IMF programs. Let's sort it out. What do you do when you have a situation like this? In the homegrown, let me use it, and in the IMF, in fact, we use the homegrown to negotiate the ECF, the IMF policy for the first time. It didn't come from the other way. You have an expenditure problem. Tell us how you are going to get, because it's expenditure exceeding revenue. So you can't assume that you keep the expenditure constant. It's everything in the most essential that you don't want to touch them, right? Then you can top up with the revenue. And it's only when you do that you reduce the deficit. And then you can go to the market and say, look, I'm doing something about my deficit. In the next 5 years, 3 years, This is what we are going to do. Then they may have confidence and refinance your debt. Without that, they won't refinance your debt. Then they will give you the money that is debt, that is required and other things. That's why the World Bank president said, come for debt suspension. We didn't want to go, right? And that's because it will come with some accountability for the money that we have collected for COVID and all those type of things. Right. Is that a concern? Right. So this is, and my last point, you see, has a way of being a bit harsh, because you spoke about regressive. Let me just quickly.
In 30 seconds.
Thank you. We exempted education, health, and other things from VAT, and it became a huge issue, that it wasn't enough. Today, you are going to be taxing transfers for these very things.
Mr. Seth Terkper, I thank you so much for your time this evening. There's a lot to talk about. This is just the first of number of engagements we're going to be having. My name is Alfred Okanse. Thank you very much for staying with us on Business Focus. Good evening.